constitutionally, Malaysia is a democracy. But of course, there are many weaknesses in that democracy, and it's challenging to create that public space. But I think what has made a difference is the support that we got from the media. That's extremely important, because without that support from the media, it would have been difficult for us to create that public voice. Because who are we? We don't have traditional religious authority. We don't have access to mosques, to prayer halls where we can reach out to people. So we had to create our own authority and actually confer on ourselves that authority to speak on matters of religion, and to use the media to get our voice heard in the public space. And that has been actually a very effective strategy in creating, in getting our voice heard, in getting our positions out there in the public space. And because we were making comments on all these issues, it created a voice for ourselves. And it's come to the point now where whenever an issue on Islam comes up, it's not just the religious authorities. They're not the sole reference point for the media and for the public. We have also become a reference point, so they come to us and ask for our position and our opinion, and that influences public policy and the debate on these issues. It really depends. I mean, in terms of the advocacy work, the law reform work, we engage with the government to try and influence the policymakers. But at the same time, we realize that politicians are not going to change without public support and public outrage. I mean, all these men lead very privileged lives, and why would they want to see any change in that privileged status? So creating that public outrage is extremely important for us. So it's a multi-pronged approach where, yes, we lobby the policymakers, the decision makers, the members of parliament in terms of reform that we want, but at the same time we also build alliances among women's groups, to speak out on this subject, so that there is that public voice out there that is clamoring for change. So it's a multi-pronged approach of decision makers, lawmakers, religious leaders, and the constituency, the public constituency, creating that public constituency to support change and demand for change. It's kind of like hard to generalize. I guess typically, many women, of course, support the work that we do. Women who have suffered discrimination, women who have not suffered discrimination but know that the world out there is an unjust world. And there are men as well, and some religious, people within the establishment who are also very supportive. But I would say that generally, it would be progressive women and men who want change, and who want to see a better world for. And I think it's interesting as well, as women, we're seeing increasing support from men, because many men now have daughters who are high achievers, and I think that's very interesting, because many of the sons that they thought, would be the ones who's going to succeed and do well in university and do well in life, that many men are actually seeing their daughters, who are more focused, who are doing well, in school, who are entering university, getting into the professions, being very responsible children, and that they're beginning to be aware that the rights of women are important, because they do not want their beloved daughters, to be deprived, and to be discriminated against. So many men also have now come out, publicly, in support of the work that we do. Well, obviously, the male patriarchs everywhere, in government, in the opposition parties, in religious authorities, in the Islamist groups that exist in the country. So they are really the biggest opponents. I mean, they're patriarchs, and who don't want, who cannot deal with the realities of their lives today, and seeing women who who are basically, you know, whose lives have changed, whose roles have changed, and who are demanding for the laws to recognize the changed realities, and, you know, for the laws to also be reformed, you know, to recognize, you know, equality and justice for women, and then, you know, and they conveniently use culture and religion to say that these laws cannot be changed, you know. So they are the ones, you know, and they exist in all spheres, you know, whether they're in government or in opposition politics or in Islamist groups or in the community, in the religious authorities, you know, who are resisting the change. In many ways, using the media is an extremely important strategy. You know, creating that public voice for ourselves, you know, through the media. And of course now with the rise of internet and the alternative media and the new media, where there is even more space for our voices to be heard, that's extremely important. The media strategy is extremely important. Public education in terms of trainings on women's rights in Islam, you know, going all over the country to train groups, you know, single mothers groups, training journalists. We also train journalists how to report, to understand Islam critically, to report on Islam, you know, to report more critically and not to be cowed into fear and silence, you know, when confronted with religious laws and religious policies. Yeah, I mean, we've always worked with other women's groups, so there is actually sort of a permanent coalition of women's groups in Malaysia called the Joint Action Group for Gender Equality, of, you know, 5 women's groups that work together over the past 20 years on women's issues. And I think it's a wonderful testament of the commonality of our interests, that even though we're different and diverse, that we all believe in equality and in justice and in women's rights. And even though Sisters in Islam is the only group that works within the framework of religion, that is not an issue at all for the other groups, you know. So that's a wonderful coalition that we've been working with. And the challenge now is really to spread our work, you know, not just Sisters in Islam, but the women's, the feminist groups, to spread the work beyond the capital city and the urban areas into other states in Malaysia. And that's what we're trying to do now, to really broaden that coalition and invite other groups from other states to come and join us.